Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2022 Chevrolet Silverado 2500, we're going to be showing you how to install the Firestone Ride-Rite air helper springs for the rear axle. But before we do that, let's just take a minute, check these out, and make sure they're going to be the right solution for you. So if you're watching this right now, chances are pretty good. You've probably noticed some issues with your suspension performance whenever you're towing a trailer down the road. And probably getting, some of that squat. Once you get hooked up, truck's probably sagging down a little bit, and kind of just overall bad ride. A lot of times what happens, the back will squat, the front will lift up, so your headlights are up in the air. You kind of lose some of your steering performance, your braking performance, and since your suspension is loaded up, you're not getting as much travel and rebound whenever you hit bumps and everything like that, and it can kind of make for a rough ride, unpleasant ride. And so a suspension enhancement like an airbag will be a great solution for you. This is what the airbags are going to look like once you have them installed, and the way they work is really simple. They're just going to more or less go in place of where your factory John's bumper was. And the thing with these John's bumpers, they don't provide any additional support. They just prevent your suspension from bottoming out. And the airbag is going to fill that whole void, more or less connecting the top frame rail to the bottom or to the top side of our rear axle here. And they're going to provide continuous support. You can really fine-tune them and dial them into your particular load. That's because they're adjustable from 5 up to 150 pounds. Now, in most cases, you're probably never going to even have to get close to that 150 pound or 150 PSI mark to help level the load. And it usually seems like, at 60 or 70 or less is what most people find themselves using. And with these being that they can handle up to 7,500 pounds, they're a little bit of a bigger diameter bag. What I found with these compared to the 5,000 pound bags is usually you can use less air to support that same load. And since the bags aren't so hard, because you're not filled up super, high or full of air, you get a little bit more of a comfortable ride. We do get a lot of people wondering if the airbag kit is going to be compatible with in-bed hitches. And for the most part, it's hard to speak for every single in-bed hitch out there, but from my experience, the answer is yes. Perfect example today, we have a Kurt gooseneck hitch installed on this truck, and even with it being a below the bed one, no issues at all with interference, and I don't really see why there would be kind of across the board there, and that's just because how the bags are actually mounted up. It'd be really odd to run into any interference issues or anything like that. With that in mind, these bags can handle up to 7,500 pounds, but that's not going to increase your truck's load carrying capacity, if that makes sense. That's just how much weight these can actually support. There are a ton of different suspension enhancement options available, and what one is going to be best for you, I really just feel like is going to depend on what you plan on doing with your truck and how you plan on using it, so on and so forth. With the air spring, kind of a good all-around enhancement, especially for those of you that tow different types of trailers and varying weights and that type of thing. Being that they're adjustable, you can really dial everything in. One of the things I always recommend with an airbag is using a compressor system. I say it because with airbags, they're going to require a little bit of maintenance. They do require a minimum of 5 PSI all the time. That way you don't damage the bag. So, those winter nights when the temp drops, you can lose your air pressure, and a compressor takes care of it for you. A lot of them you set up, as soon as you turn the truck on, it'll go to what you have it set at, and you can make changes on the fly. You're not going to have to deal with pulling over and going to an air pump and dealing with all that. The compressor kits that I really like are the Airlift, the easy ones. They come in a bunch of different configurations. They're wireless, and we've had a lot of good luck with them here. As a matter of fact, that's actually the compressor kit I'm putting on this truck today here in a little while. If that's something you don't want to have to mess with, or maybe let's say if you have a work truck, right? That's all you use it for. You don't really want to have to deal with making adjustments or anything like that. You can always get what's called a sumo spring or a timberin. They're essentially just big jounce bumpers, set up a little bit different, of course, but they fill this void and make contact whenever you put a load back here. And so it's kind of there when you need it and not when you don't. No maintenance at all with them, but you don't really get any adjustability. And then you kind of have stuff in between. For example, there's some active suspension parts that more or less almost act as another leaf spring. And I've had a lot of good luck with those too. You kind of get the best of both worlds, some minor adjustability, and there's still, the truck's still comfortable when you're unloaded. And so that's always something you could look into as well. Not quite ready for an onboard air compressor just yet, but still want a tool that you can use in a pinch. You can pick up one of these portable handheld compressors. They're pretty cool actually. They're slow, but it will inflate the bags and help you out in a situation like that. And honestly, these aren't really too bad to have just laying around anyway, if you got your bike tires to air up or anything else for that matter. One thing that is pretty nice about this setup is how compatible they are with the different types of Silverados, meaning if you have a two-wheel drive model, a four-wheel drive model, a gas engine, or a diesel engine, they're going to bolt up and work just fine. So at the end of the day, a really nice setup. I like Firestone bags, especially too because how they're attached, how the actual bag's attached to the plates. You can let the axle hang. All right, so when you go to get your truck serviced, you're not going to have to worry about destroying your bag if you happen to jack it up from the frame and the tires are hanging down, which is nice. One less thing you don't have to worry about. So all around, a lot of people are happy with these, having that adjustability, still being able to maintain that comfort whenever you're going down the road. Can't really ask for too much more. As far as the installation goes, believe it or not, this is probably one of the easier bags to install on these pickups. Still a little time consuming, you're underneath here working, but everything goes together pretty good. There's a few moments where you might kind of get hung up, and hopefully I can help you out, show you some tips and tricks along the way to get you past that, but why don't we go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the back of our Chevy, and the first thing that I did was just temporarily lower and remove the spare tire. Just gives us a lot more room to work. And from there, we can move over to the passenger side and remove this heat shield. There's going to be a couple of bolts right up in this area. There's a 13mm head bolt right here. More forward. We have another one. Lower this down and get it out of our way for now. We can get our factory jounce bumper removed. So I just sprayed some soapy water on it, and then you can get a big pry bar, and these just pop right out of place. Not going to be reinstalling this. We'll get rid of it and do the same thing to get the passenger side removed. Start to assemble our upper brackets. So we'll have this piece and these two pieces, and they're going to sit on here like this. All right, so you'll take this style of bolt, run it up through there, take a flange nut. We'll just get these hand tight for now. One on each end. I'll do the same exact thing for that one there. You can then take two of these longer bolts, put them through the side pieces there, smaller flange nut, and just get these going a few threads. So one on each side. We're going to do a little something here that'll make the installation a little bit easier here in a few steps. If you take your air spring, you can see we have this threaded portion and then this dowel right here. If you look at our the bottom of our upper bracket, we got the large hole, which this will set on top of this threaded portion, and then three smaller holes. Well, that's where the dowel is going to go into, and we want that dowel to go into the middle hole. So if you just set that on there, excuse me, we can visually verify that that dowel is in the center, right? You can see it there. And what I'm going to do is come back and just put a couple marks on the bracket, you know, on the bag, and that way we can verify, you know, that the top is going to be where it needs to be 100%. Grab the air fitting now, and this is going to thread into here. And I usually just get it finger tight and come back and snug these down, usually a couple of turns. You can almost feel it kind of get pretty tight, and then I'll just usually bump it a little bit more from there. So my thought is, you know, if we have a leak here, I'd rather come back and snug it up a little bit more instead of getting carried away and end up cracking the fitting or something along those lines. And a quick way to check it now while this is off of the truck, instead of it being on there and figuring out you have a leak here, because they're kind of a pain to get to, something that you can do if you grab your air hose, right, big bundle of it, and just cut off a few inches. And I guess while we're here, I'll show you how to cut this hose. You want to use a tool like this, or a tubing cutter, or you can take a utility knife and put this on a block of wood. You just want a good, clean, straight cut. That way it don't leak or anything. That's a good example on how that should look. You know, you don't have burrs or it's not pinched or anything like that. I'll do the same thing on my other side here. And you can take the air fitting, and the way these work, they're just quick connects or push to connect. So you pop that in. We'll pop the other end into the bag, and then we can check for leaks now. Put some air in the bag to check for leaks, and this is going to hold true across the board. Once we get everything together, we'll come back and spray all of our fittings down, but for right now we're just worried about that one there. Spray soapy water on it, and what you're looking for is for bubbles to continuously and rapidly form. If you see that, you know you got a leak. In our case, looks like we are all sealed up, so we're in good shape. Nothing to worry about there on that fitting. So I'll let our air out. And if you do happen to have a leak on that fitting, you know, you could bump it another quarter, half a turn or something, snug it up a little more, check again. But at the end, when you go to check for leaks, and let's say if you have a leak in one of the quick connect fittings, what you can do, the way these work, you just kind of hold pressure down on the top, and then the line pulls right out. If you're leaking there, do that, recut the line clean, reinstall it, fill it up full of air, and check again. But we're in good shape at this one. I don't have to worry about all these until we get everything together. On the bottom of your air spring, there's going to be a threaded hole. You can take your lower bracket, and that oval shaped hole is going to line up with it. You can take this little short bolt here and thread that in, and we're just going to get it hand tight. That way we can still kind of slide this and maneuver it around. Moving back underneath the truck, we can take our upper bracket, and this is going to sit around our jounce bumper cup there. Get that into position. Might have to loosen up these nuts a little bit more. Slide up there. You want it to sit flat, you know, up on the bottom of the frame, and this to be sitting flat against the side of the frame. And while you're holding it in position, I'm just going to kind of run these down finger tight to get it to somewhat hold here. While this is up there, flat and flush and everything, and you got these, the thinner bolts, hand tight, I'm going to come back with a 7/16 and snug them up a little bit. When you're doing this, you want to run them down or try to run them down the same on each side. So I'm going to hit this one a couple turns, same thing for the other side. When we got those snug, we'll do the 4 bolts on the bottom. Use a 7/32 Allen head, and the nut is a 9/16. Make sure everything's flat still, and snug these up. And I like to alternate as well. Do the front corner and then move to the back corner to just help draw everything in evenly. Come back with a torque wrench now and tighten down all this hardware to the amount specified either in your instructions or on top of the airbag. Grab our airbag and the lower bracket, and this part on the lower bracket where it bends down is going to face towards the outside of the truck or towards a tire. We'll set this in place. We'll make sure that our marks that we made line up. And verify our lines are matching up. And with the lower bracket, make sure that's sitting flat and in a good position, which I think we're in good shape. And we're going to mark the bottom now too. We'll just put a couple marks on the bottom of our bag and on the bottom of that bracket. And we'll take this back out. That way we can tighten up our bolt. Verifying our marks are still aligned on the bottom bracket, we'll take our 7/32 and our torque wrench and completely tighten this bolt down. I put our air spring assembly back in place. You can take this big star washer, put that over it, and then the big nut. We can get this nut tightened down now with an 1 1/8" wrench or socket. Problem is sometimes you try to get a socket on there and one of the clamps that goes around the jounce bumper, it's pretty common. I've had this happen on pretty much every install that I've done with these. The nut will, turn about half a turn and then kind of make contact with it a little bit. So if that happens to you, like I said, it's something I ran into quite a few times, and it's something you got to deal with. But we'll go ahead and get this completely tightened down. I wanted to mention, if you're doing the passenger side, before you connect the air spring to that upper bracket, you want to take the heat shield and put it in place. So this will just sit on top of the bag and get sandwiched in between the top of the bag and the bracket. And you want to position the heat shield part, facing towards the exhaust. That way it'll stay or keep the bag protected. To secure the lower bracket to the vehicle, we're going to have these hooks. It'll slide into place like that. You can take a carriage bolt, drop it from the top down. Then you'll have a flange nut. We'll get that started hand tight. On the front side of the axle, you're gonna have the same setup here. And pretty much every time I've done a set of these, what happens is this is gonna wanna hit that piece of metal and not let you get it over far enough. A couple ways you can go about it. What I did was just on a grinder, I just removed a little bit of material there, just enough to let this line up. I took a hand file and opened up that section a little bit. I've put this like this, taken a hammer and tapped it over. So a bunch of ways you can do it. but you know, don't be surprised if that's something you run into. Once you get that all squared away though, you can take that same hardware combination, the carriage bolt, the flange nut, get this hand tight, then I'm going to snug this one down, go to the front, back and forth, and alternate evenly with a 9/16 socket. You get those brackets tightened down, use your torque wrench and get them completely torqued. This airbag assembly is all set up and the other side set up the same way, so just do the same thing over there, get that one all wrapped up. And once you have that done, we can start to route our air lines from the bags to the back of the truck. So we'll take a look back there and see where we can mount up our fittings. That way we actually know where we need to route the air lines to. The kit's going to come included with this bracket and a couple of big zip ties. And if you want, you can zip tie this to the hitch, but on these trucks it just kind of sits weird, not real crazy about it. You can always mount up your air fittings, you know, replace your license plate screws, drill out the holes bigger, use these to hold it down if you want. But what I've been doing lately, I take the bracket and I drill a hole in it, and I utilize this attachment point right here. I use a T40, pull that out and fit that through there. I think it looks clean. It's easy to get to, not super noticeable. And you can see I already prepped one side. What you do for both of these, take your fitting, a flat washer, push that through. You'll have another flat washer you put on there, and a nut. And when it comes to tightening these down, usually don't get too carried away. I'll get them snug. And then take a 1/2 inch socket and wrench, and usually just do it by hand. That'll be sufficient. I took our big bundle of airline and cut it in half. So one of the halves to be over here for driver, other for the passenger side, but I cut it like we talked about, plugged it into our fitting, and routed it up and just followed this harness. And when you're routing stuff, make sure and do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts. Use some zip ties every now and again to keep it secure. Comes down here, quite a bit extra, and just kind of loop that up. Plugged it into the back of our fitting. And for the passenger side one, which is this one, took that airline, ran it up all the way over to the passenger side of our frame. We have it running along the side there and up into the airbag. Now, with this side, before you plug the line into the airbag, they give you these little sleeves to help protect from heat since the exhaust is right here. So make sure to put those on first and then plug the line into the bag. We're going to fill our bags up to the pressure that the instructions suggest. Check for any clearance issues and check for any leaks on all of our fittings, like I showed you earlier. Check for leaks and we're in good shape, nothing to worry about. And at this point, you can reinstall your spare tire and that heat shield the opposite way that you removed it. I'm going to be doing a compressor system next on this truck, so I'm going to leave the tire and the heat shield out of the way, give me some more room to work. But with all that said, that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Firestone Ride-Rite air helper springs for the rear axle on our 2022 Chevy Silverado 2500.